Chapter 19, Not Again. I wonder what this one's going to be about. No telling. Mrs. Malloy insisted that the whole family attend the countywide spelling contest that night, even though none of her daughters would be in it. It's important to show our support for the language arts, just as much as it is to support the band concerts and ball games, she said. Why should I want to go see Wally Hatford win for the 4th grade? Caroline whined. I should be up there on stage, not Wally. Caroline, you missed your word, so you should not be up there. Those were the rules. Thinking things through and taking your time are important too, and you didn't do either of those. Now put on a clean shirt and let's try to be at the school by 7 so we don't have to sit at the very back. It was almost more than Caroline could bear. It was like being a famous actress and having to sit in the audience while an understudy went on stage, playing your role. Wally Hatford was a good speller, but he didn't like being in contests. He never even liked standing up in front of the room. Caroline deserved to be in that contest. She, who loved the stage and the spotlight, deserved to win for Buckman's 4th grade. She would have been so good at it, she could have worn her best dress, and she would have bowed to the audience when she won first place. She changed her shirt, and out the door they went, crossing the swinging bridge on a beautiful April night and walking the 2 blocks to the school. Cars were lined up on each side of the street, for people had driven in from all over the county. The air was filled with the sounds of friends calling to friends, parents calling greetings to parents, and contestants laughing and chattering. The Malloys took seats in the middle of the auditorium, and after they had sat down, discovered that the Hatfords, all but Wally of course, were sitting in the same row across the aisle. Mrs. Malloy leaned forward and smiled, and Mrs. Hatford waved back. The contest began about 15 minutes later with a great deal of lining up and changing places and counting heads before the contestants took their places in the first 3 rows of the auditorium. The winning first graders from all schools went up on stage first. When students spelled their words correctly, they went to the end of the line to wait for another turn. But if they missed, a teacher escorted them to the steps at one side of the stage, and they joined their classmates below. The winning word for the first grade was untie, and everyone clapped as the boy who won it grinned and waved at his parents. The second graders came on stage next, their arms straight down at their sides, looking even more serious. When only 2 girls were left on stage, one misspelled the word dinosaur, and to her even greater embarrassment, broke into tears and left the stage weeping. The winning word in 3rd grade was discipline, and then it was the 4th grade's turn. Remember, said the county superintendent who was calling out the words, you may ask to have a word repeated, and you may ask to have it used in a sentence. He also reminded the contestants that the winner for each grade would go to the statewide spelling contest in Charleston in May. Miserably, Caroline watched as Wally Hatford shuffled across the stage, hands in his pockets beside the other contestants. Mrs. Malloy leaned forward again and smiled down the row at Mrs. Hatford, and Mrs. Hatford leaned forward and smiled again. Tremendous, said the superintendent to the first person in line. The girl spelled the word correctly and moved to the end. Scissors, said the superintendent. The next girl mistakenly put an E before the R and was escorted off stage. Wally was given the word knowledge, which he spelled correctly, and again the Malloys and the Hatfords exchanged smiles. Peter clapped for his brother. Caroline was silently weeping already. No actress should have to go through the agony she endured. Look at Wally up there, she thought. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were on the floor, hands in his pockets, toes pointing inward. He looked as uncomfortable and awkward as an elephant at a tea party. Wally no more wanted to go to the state contest than he wanted to go to the dentist. She would have been such a wonderful contestant to represent Buckman's 4th grade. She would have gone on to the state contest and then the national, and she would have been on TV. From there, it was only a short step to Broadway. Oh, life was so unfair. One more contestant was eliminated as the line moved toward the superintendent, and once again it was Wally's turn. Handkerchief, said the superintendent. Oh, that's so easy, Caroline thought. That was the easiest word so far. She could spell much harder words than that. Handkerchief, Wally repeated, looking straight ahead. H-A-N-D. He hesitated, and Caroline knew with every bone in her body that he was about to misspell it so that he wouldn't have to go on to the state contest. He would probably put a C instead of a K. Said Wally. I know it, Caroline cried, suddenly leaping to her feet. Caroline, whispered her mother. Handkerchief. I'm from Buckman Elementary, too. I'm in 4th grade, too, and I know it, she pleaded while people in the front turned to stare at her, and her mother frantically lunged across Eddie's lap, trying to grab her. Impulsively, Caroline whirled and faced the audience. But I know it, she cried, sure that someone would see the justice of her taking Wally's place. Instead of a sea of smiling faces, however, Caroline saw only disgust and ridicule. She turned slowly around again. Will the young lady in the pink shirt please sit down, said the superintendent, unsmiling. Caroline tearfully collapsed on her seat, her face beet red with embarrassment. Beth and Eddie had their hands over their faces. Coach Malloy was glaring down the row at her and up on stage. Wally's face was as pink as Caroline's shirt. We'll try you on another word, son, the superintendent said. He turned to look at Caroline again and said, I trust there will be no more disruptions. There won't, Eddie said. Gymnastics. Wally missed it. He put a K after the C. But when he walked off stage and the girl behind him was declared the winner, his shoulders were straight and his head erect, and he looked like a man released from prison. Caroline, how could you? Mrs. Malloy whispered angrily across Eddie's lap. You ruined his chance to go to the state contest. And Caroline realized she had done it again, embarrassed her whole family. She had stood up before the largest audience she had ever faced and blown it. Nobody clapped and cheered. Nobody threw flowers. They hated her, and she deserved it. Her family was not proud of her in the least, and certainly neither were the Hatfords. Even Peter was scowling at her, and when the contest was over at last, and both families moved toward the aisle to leave, Peter whispered to Caroline, You are in deep trouble. Chapter 20, Apology. The only time Wally could remember being so relieved was the time he thought he had broken his leg, but had only sprained it. He had been all ready to misspell a word on purpose, but he really had not known whether gymnastics had a K near the end or not. He could not get off the stage fast enough, but as he took his place in the second row and glanced behind him, he noticed Beth and Eddie with their hands over their faces and knew that Caroline was in trouble. But he could not have felt better himself. Not only had he kept Caroline from going to the state contest and being so stuck up they couldn't stand her, but her outburst had made her whole family angry with her. It wasn't until he looked back over his other shoulder, however, that he saw the disappointment in his own parents' face. And suddenly he discovered that he had blown the one thing he was really good at. Nobody seemed to know he was around until they wanted something spelled. When Josh or Jake were writing a report and needed to know how a word was spelled, he'd usually call out to Wally instead of using the dictionary. Hey, Wally, does judgment have an E after the G? Josh might say, or Jake would say, Wally, does Connecticut have a T at the end or two? Even his parents asked him to spell a word now and then. But just because he was a good speller, did that mean he had to worry all the way through Buckman Elementary that he would have to go to the county contest? If he won the county contest, he'd have to worry about going to the state. And if he won that, he'd worry about the national. What did his parents expect of him anyway, to become president of the United States? When he joined his family later, his mother put her arm around his shoulder and said, That was such a shame about Caroline, Wally. I think she got you rattled. You should have been the winner. No, it's okay, Wally said. You know how I feel about contests. His dad patted him on the back. Well, no one else in the family ever got as far as the county spelling bee, son. We're right proud of you. Thanks, Dad. It was nice to be noticed for a change, by his family anyway. As everyone moved toward the center aisle, Wally noticed that Caroline seemed to be trying to get out of the auditorium as fast as possible. But Coach Malloy's big hand reached out, grabbed her shoulder, and hauled her backward a few steps until she was face to face with the Hatfords. Wally, said Coach Malloy, I think my daughter has something to say to you. I'm sorry, she stammered. For what? Her father demanded. For trying to help Wally. No, that is not what you were trying to do. For trying to take his place in the contest. Right. You embarrassed us, you embarrassed Wally, and you embarrassed yourself. I hope you can understand how upset we are with our daughter. Yes, said Mrs. Hatford, and then she added with a little smile, I never raised a daughter, but I do understand. Then she and Caroline's mother chattered on about other things, and Wally's brothers grinned and elbowed him as they left the auditorium and stepped out into the sweet April air. Chapter 21 is What Caroline Saw. So we only have 2 chapters left. So I would love it if you would just send me a message on YouTube. Click on the link below the video or send me a Seesaw message. Let me know who you think is going to win the bottle race. Tell me who you think. Is it going to be Beth, Caroline, Eddie, Jake, Josh, Wally, or Peter? Tell me who you think and why do you think the way you do. I look forward to hearing from you.